I always thought the Tucson was a little on the small side for America, and apparently Hyundai realized that as well. And for 2022, they're giving us a bigger Tucson than you'll find in other world markets. For 2022, we also get a hybrid model and a plug-in hybrid model. To help me tell you all about this new hybrid trim, I have our new presenter here at Alex Autos, Brian Ross Kelly. He's going to be coming to us from Atlanta, so you'll definitely be seeing more of him very, very shortly on the channel. So Brian, what do you think about the new Tucson? Do you think they went in the right direction by making this a bit bigger than before?
I think so. And you know, the new Tucson is both a design statement and a tech incubator. So I'm excited to see if the hybrid components help create more of a complete package.
So Brian, what does Hyundai call this particular look?
They call it parametric dynamics.
So that's what they call these little elements here in the front. This is pretty similar to what we saw in the Elantra, but different definitely than the larger crossovers in Hyundai's lineup at the moment. Have they said if this is going to continue, or are they going to make them all look a little different?
I think it's going to continue because if you look at the Santa Cruz, it adopts a very similar style up front. The refreshed Hyundai Palisade is expected to get a similar design as well. So I think they're going to move forward with this for sure.
And the most interesting thing for me are these individual LED elements. These are really visible in your rearview mirror. I don't know if you saw me when I was driving behind you and vice versa, but these are really, really obvious, especially at night where the front end is really illuminated here. The headlights, they're actually down here, but they're two different modules. The base model gets a reflector LED headlight. The top end trim, which is what we're driving today, this gets projectors.
Around side, you'll see the designer's boldest choices on the Tucson. And that starts with these three crease lines that come together right here and shoot off into one direction down that way.
And they kind of occasionally look to me like the car came from the factory with shopping cart dents already in it. I kind of like it, but it does kind of really strike the eye as very, very different. Of course, the most important thing for most American shoppers is the size. This has grown greatly over the last generation. Hyundai realized that the Tucson was a little bit small, so for 2022, there are actually two different Tucsons. There's one for Europe that's going to be a little bit smaller than this, and there's going to be one targeted at North America, China, and other markets that like bigger vehicles. So this is 182.3 inches long. It's 3 inches longer than the CX-5, only 2 inches shorter than the Volkswagen Tiguan, and the Tiguan has a third row. This does not.
The off-road vibe of the Tucson is more than just with the squared-off wheel arches, it's also with the 8.3 inches of ground clearance you get, which is similar to a Subaru Forester.
And one thing I found interesting too, we have 235 width tires on all versions of this, plug-in hybrid, regular hybrid, and the base trim as well. What do you think of the rear end design? Some people say that these taillights look like a Ford Mustang taillight. I kind of see it.
I see it, but I think they look more like saber-toothed tiger fangs or some sort of, front teeth a little bit. But I really like the sort of crystallized effect that they get on the limited trim because they are full LED back here, except for
the turn signals and the backup lights right down there. Those are incandescent. So the brake lights are LEDs, but not in all trims. If you get the base model, then you do get incandescent lights. And I actually haven't seen the base trim. I assume that this LED strip is also missing in that base trim. Have you seen them?
I feel like I've seen them on the road before, but I can't recall at the top of my head what that looks like. I believe the light bar is still there. It just doesn't have the LED sort of look to it.
If you have the answer to this, let us know down there in the comment section below, because I cannot find a picture anywhere of the rear taillights in the base model. Although I do know that, again, they're not LEDs, but every other trim they are. Other interesting twist, we have the Hyundai logo. Rather than a 3D logo that's hanging out here and more difficult to clean, it's behind a sheet of plexiglass right there integrated into this rear window area.
And I appreciate that unlike some of the newer Genesis models, they did choose to hide the rear wiper up under the rear spoiler instead of plopping it down.
That's a really nice touch.
Yeah.
The other odd thing, of course, for me is the divorced tail lamp arrangement, very much like the divorced headlight arrangement. This is a very Hyundai Kia thing to do lately. And I have noticed that some other car companies are starting to copy this design where, turn signals down here, brake lights up here, and up front, the headlight and the turn signals are not in one piece. I am not a fan.
I'm indifferent about it because I think it's a new and different way of doing things, and if everyone's following suit, I think it'll become the norm eventually.
Ooh, I hope not. One good thing, though, about this arrangement, rather than having them on the hatch, is that if this hatch was unlocked and I could open it, you would notice that in vehicles where the taillight is on the hatch, like we see in some Audi products, then you have to have a tail lamp repeater somewhere else according to the law. So this sort of side skirts that, and it is amber, which is my preference.
The base Hyundai Tucson is equipped with a 2.5-liter 4-cylinder engine with 187 horsepower, 178 pound-feet of torque, and with front-wheel drive, you'll get about 29 miles per gallon combined, all-wheel drive, about 26.
If you're interested in saving fuel, you're going to want the hybrid model. That pairs a 1.6-liter turbocharged engine with an electric motor. This is one of the very few turbocharged hybrids available in North America. Power from the 1.6-liter turbo is 180 horsepower and 195 pound-feet of torque. In this hybrid model, it's paired with a 59 horsepower electric motor. In the plug-in hybrid, that goes up to 90 horsepower. So power levels will differ whether you get the plug or not. The non-plug version is 226 horsepower combined and probably right around 250 pound-feet of torque. The plug-in hybrid comes in at 261. Fuel economy is pretty competitive in this model, 38 miles per gallon combined if you get the blue trim, 37 for the other versions of the hybrid. The plug-in hybrid, thanks to the added weight, goes down to 35 miles per gallon, but you do get 33 miles of electric range. The big reason that fuel economy is a little bit lower in this than in a RAV4 hybrid is that this has a mechanical all-wheel drive system and a traditional 6-speed automatic. So if you're interested in having a hybrid that feels more like a regular gasoline car, this is what you're going to want. This also has the same kind of winter weather traction as the non-hybrid model, something that cannot be said of the RAV4.
The Tucson Hybrid starts at $29,350, and that's about a $2,350 increase over the all-wheel drive gas-only model at its base price. And it'll take you a little bit less than 4 years to break even on that. Now, if you'd like to challenge your bladder on road trips, the hybrid is the one for you. You've got about 521 miles of range versus 372 for the gas-only.
When it comes to driver assistance tech, the Tucson goes about things a little bit differently than some of the competition. Adaptive cruise control is not standard on any trim. And when this model first launched, blind spot monitoring wasn't either, but Hyundai has decided to switch things up, and now blind spot is standard on all models. But if you want adaptive cruise control, you have to step up to the SEL trim. Now, I've noticed, have you seen this too? Like a lot of car companies, they'll either do cruise control, adaptive cruise control, or blind spot monitoring, but not both on the base model. I'm kind of a fan of adaptive cruise control.
I think blind spot monitor is more of a priority for me personally. I think, it's the new backup camera. It helps you sort of see what's on your side. And if they're going to mandate one, I think that's the one that should be first. Yeah.
I kind of see that, but I also think that, my head moves like this and my head moves like that. And so I can see my blind spot unless I'm driving a panel van or something like that. So I'm just a little torn. I think I would rather have the convenience of adaptive cruise control standard.
Well, what do you think of Hyundai's digital side view cameras that actually give you a view of your blind spot in the center stack? Do you think that helps?
Those are cool, but I don't know if I'd rely on that. I mean, it's a nice to have, and it looks really snazzy when you have passengers in the car and they're like, ooh, look, there's a camera with an image on it. But I have a feeling that I would still just turn my head.
A traditionalist.
Yeah. Jumping into the front seats, I found the driver's seat to be pretty comfortable. I do wish this had a 4-way adjustable lumbar support.
Yeah, and I'm the kind of person who likes the least amount of lumbar as possible, and for some reason this one doesn't really...
It's the young back.
I guess, yeah, and it doesn't reduce to a level that I think is comfortable for me, but again, some people like having that much, but it would be nice to be able to have it go up and down as well.
One nice touch that we find in a lot of Hyundai vehicles is that the front seat tracks move really quite far rearward. So if you're a taller person, you might want to look at this over some of those other alternatives because you might actually find a better driving position. But the seat bottom cushion is still, I think, just a little bit short because it's not extendable. If you want an extending thigh cushion, you have to look at something like a Santa Fe.
And one thing to note that I've picked up on is there's a little bit of firmness to the seats. So if you like a softer, comfier, sort of plusher seat, this is not going to be your cup of tea, I think. But
yeah, another reason to get that Santa Fe. And you don't have a lumbar support over there at
I
all.
don't have any lumbar, so I have no choice.
Is that a little too far out, or is that just in the right position?
As a matter of fact, this seat, it's fine. It's different over there, I think. I think with the lumbar support, it's automatically just poking out a little bit more than it is in this seat.
The answer is always more lumbar.
Always more.
The front passenger seat is all the way back in its tracks. How are we doing over there on that side?
I'm still able to sit here comfortably. I mean, I am brushing up against...
A little bit
left, yeah, and it is carved out for your knees in this hard plastic back right here, so it's not terrible, and I'm only 5'9", so...
Yeah, I don't think I could fit there,
Yeah.
but I do fit really well over here with the driver's seat positioned for me at 6 feet tall. I have about 4 inches of legroom left or so here. This has nearly as much legroom as the Santa Fe, actually, if I remember the numbers correctly, and exactly the same amount according to the numbers as the new Subaru Forester.
And like the Santa Fe, you get this really nice panoramic sunroof that makes it feel more open and airy back here. It's a nice touch, and I'm personally a big fan of panoramic sunroofs. I don't know about you, but...
Yeah, lots of headroom back here as well. Even though my head is not really above the glass, it's above the fabric on the outside, I have about 1.5 inches of headroom left. Now, when you take a look at the chart on the side of your screen, I will mention here really quickly that the Escape's legroom numbers are just a little bit different than everybody else's because Ford uses a different measurement method for their legroom. So even though it appears that there's more legroom in it than in this, there actually isn't. And both these seats recline, so this is the most upright position. Why don't you put yours in the most reclined position? Ooh, that looks relaxing.
It's relaxing, but I will note that there is a little bit of a pressure point at the bottom of your back once it is tilted back there. Yeah, so I mean, not the end of the world, but it is noticeable. If you're looking to use the Tucson as a family vehicle, rest assured this back seat is the perfect size for a large child seat.
Yep, especially the rear-facing variety because they require a reasonable amount of room between this seat back and the seat back up front.
The limited trim of the Tucson Hybrid gets Hyundai's hands-free liftgate access. So you just stand here with the key in your hand and the liftgate will open automatically to reveal whatever's inside.
Now, how do you feel about that versus the whole waggle your foot under the bumper thing?
I think it makes it a little bit easier because if you're holding things in your hand and you're trying to do a one-legged balancing act, that could prove to be somewhat difficult, I think.
Yeah, I'm kind of torn because if you tend to walk behind your vehicle with your key in your pocket a lot, you may end up with your trunk lid or your hatch popping open now and then, but it's a little bit less common to be doing the polka right down there by your bumper.
Right, and now with the cargo area, we've got about 38.7 cubic feet of space, and if you get the plug-in hybrid, you'll actually bump that down to 31.9 cubic feet because under the floor here, there are going to be more hybrid components and batteries and such, so you do get a little bit smaller.
Really nice touch though, the hybrid does not lose any space versus the non-hybrid, although we don't have a spare down there. There is room for one, but all that area could also be used for storage, so that's really up to you.
And I hear the shelf that you're sitting on there, Alex, is good for only about 130 pounds?
I'm not sure what you're talking about. Either I have lost weight or the shelf is clearly rated for more. I'm going to go with I have lost weight.
Okay.
That didn't look very sincere.
Mine or yours?
Yours.
As we take a look around the interior of the Tucson, note that this is a limited trim, so the highest trim available. Up top, we have a large and expansive panoramic moonroof that does open, which is cool. Front seat belts are height adjustable, as are the headrests, but only two ways, up and down. The leather seats are perforated and are heated and ventilated. Over on the door panels, we have a mixture of piano black plastic and some fabric trim inserts, which adds a little bit of texture. The armrests are padded, and then we have a bottle holder down here for a pretty decent sized bottle. And then you see the line that carries your eye all the way across to the dashboard. If you take a closer look in the design elements up here, you'll notice these tiny little holes within the lines. This is Hyundai's diffuser style air conditioning system, which provides a breeze instead of a direct airflow from one single vent. These vents are your typical regular air vents, but back over here on the driver's side, you have a small section here where there are diffused air ports, but it's not very much because over here on the very far side, it's another traditional air vent. Speaking of the dashboard, Hyundai gave it this sort of floating look to it that has this flat panel that houses the 10.25-inch touchscreen as well as these capacitive touch buttons for your HVAC controls and your media controls. Now, if you get a lower trim, the screen goes down a couple sizes, and you also get some physical controls for the volume and tune knob. Otherwise, on limited trims, it's all flat, all touch. Down below here we have two USB ports, one on the right for charging your smartphone and the other on the left for connecting to the wired Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. In a strange twist, Hyundai still requires a wire for the larger 10.25-inch screen. The smaller screens get wireless. This row of buttons here includes controls for your heated and ventilated front seats, heated steering wheel, some driving controls, and the surround view cameras. If you move on further up, we've got the toggle for the drive mode select, as well as the button to lock the center coupling for the all-wheel drive system. And then of course we have Hyundai's typical push button shifter right here, as well as the automatic hold button and the electronic parking brake. The cup holders are an average size, so is the storage space you'll find beneath the center armrest. On SEL convenience and limited trims, you get the 10.25-inch LCD instrument cluster, which is very good at blocking out glare and sunlight, so it doesn't actually need a lid or any sort of shade. Now, if you get a base blue trim level, this is a traditional gauge cluster with a cover and a bin style, but this looks so much cooler. And it is somewhat customizable based on your drive modes. As you shuffle through like this, you'll see the changes, but you can also make those changes individually from those drive modes. Now, if you get the limited trim like we have, you also have Hyundai's blind view cameras. So if I turn the turn signals on, you'll see the camera view of what's in the blind spot on that particular side. The steering wheel is leather wrapped, very comfortable in the hand, and has a really cool design. It also includes paddle shifters, but don't be fooled, these aren't regenerative braking paddles, these are actual paddle shifters for that 6-speed automatic transmission.
So Brian's going to go ahead and start heading up the hill. Let's talk about the numbers. First, 0 to 60 happened in this model in 7.6 seconds. That is just 1/10 of a second slower than the last RAV4 hybrid that we tested. Now, some folks have asked, how is that possible since the power levels aren't exactly equal, but the curb weight is not too far apart? It likely has to do with the design of this hybrid system. Since it does have a traditional 6-speed automatic transmission, there is a little bit of time wasted in terms of shifting. But the shift feel, on the other hand, is going to feel more traditional, more like the regular version of the car.
In some instances, I have noticed that when you put the pedal to the metal or you need to pass somebody, there is a slight delay. You know, you're not
Yep.
going to get that instant electric-only torque. There is torque there at the bottom end, but the whole concert that's happening here, it needs a little bit of a second to get itself together before it actually launches you forward.
Right. It's that traditional car feel, just like a regular automatic transmission vehicle. It's going to have to downshift. And it is a little bit different in the RAV4. The RAV4 tends to drive more like, honestly, an electric car. Some people mistakenly call that a CVT that the RAV4 hybrid has. It's actually not correct. It really is just a planetary hybrid power split system. There's really no direct corollary as far as transmissions go. And as a result, it does feel more like a electric car.
Now, is a CVT going to be lighter than a traditional automatic transmission? What would have been the motivation for them to go with the 6-speed over a CVT? Because they have the IVT that they use in like the Forte and the Elantra. Why couldn't they have gone with that and maybe eked out a couple of extra miles per gallon out of this thing?
Well, for Hyundai, their IVT, which is what you'll find in the Elantra and the Kia Forte, it's really only designed for smaller vehicles and much less power. So this hybrid system actually has a great deal of torque. It's likely around 250 pound-feet, although they won't give us an official specification. And that particular CVT is not designed for that kind of torque level. So the 6-speed automatic transmission made a lot of sense. It also, again, preserves that traditional feel. In the 60-to-0 braking test, it took 129 feet for this vehicle to stop from 60 miles an hour back to zero, compared to 131 feet for the last RAV4 hybrid that I tested. I think that mainly has to do with the tires on this.
So we have eco mode, smart mode, sport mode, and snow mode. Snow mode is going to start you in second gear, get you a little bit more traction out of those very, very slippery situations. In sport mode, you can tell that the transmission tuning kicks it up a notch. You can get a little bit more oomph out of the first gear, but otherwise your to 60 times do not change among the drive modes.
Back out on the paved road, I'm going to give the ride score an A. The ride is very well composed, but keep in mind that modern crossovers tend to be a little bit firmer than they used to be. So this is as compared to everything else that's on sale today, not as compared to, say, your year 2000 crossover or SUV, which was definitely tuned towards the softer side of things. That has surprised me a little bit because ground clearance is creeping up in a lot of crossovers. This now has 8.3 inches of ground clearance, and really the last generation of the RAV4 and a bunch of other products were down there around 5 or 6 inches. So it seems like manufacturers have gotten more serious about off-roading ability. They want that off-road cred, but they still give us a very on-road tune, which is rational because most people are going to drive this on-road. As far as a daily driver goes, this is definitely the kind of ride quality that I would want in my next car if I was going to spend half an hour to an hour commuting to work.
Agreed. Yeah, this is a very comfortable car, and you feel the weight of the batteries keeping it composed and compliant. And out on the gravel road here we're on, it's smooth enough. So it gets an A for me as well.
When it comes to cabin noise, at 50 miles an hour, I measured 72 decibels in here, which is, interestingly enough, exactly the same as the RAV4 hybrid. So I'm also going to give this a B when it comes to cabin noise. Generally speaking, plug-in hybrids tend to be a little bit quieter in this segment. That applies to the RAV4 Prime very slightly, and I expect it's going to apply to this as well. That mainly has to do with the additional sound deadening effect of the battery being basically between you and the road. Keep in mind, this does have wider tires than the last RAV4 hybrid that we tested. Most of those models have 225 width tires. These are 235 width. So I'd actually expected this to be perhaps a little bit louder.
Yeah, and if you do cross-shop this with a RAV4 hybrid or even the Escape and Maverick hybrids, you'll notice that the engine note is not as gritty or coarse as those engines, the actual gas engines when they kick in. This one has more of a sort of a air dryer sound to it.
I think that has to do with the fact that this engine is a little bit smaller, and of course there's that turbocharger there, which is, again, somewhat unusual for a hybrid. There aren't very many turbocharged hybrids at all, and most of those really are mild hybrids.
Right.
Now on to the subject of fuel economy, theoretically the most important aspect of any new hybrid. According to the EPA, this is rated for, what, 37, 38 mpg, somewhere around there?
Yeah, 37 for limited trim and the SEL convenience, but down the blue trim you get 38.
Yeah, and over a week of mixed driving, I've been averaging just about 36 miles per gallon, so definitely a little bit below the EPA score. I suspect the wide tires and the mechanical all-wheel drive system are the main reason for that. If you are after the premium in efficiency, it's really difficult to go wrong with the Escape hybrid and the RAV4 hybrid. Bottom line, the Tucson hybrid is definitely a lot of fun, and I think the fun level and the mechanical all-wheel drive system compensate for the fuel economy, at least enough for me. What do you think?
I think so. I mean, it feels more like a normal car and it feels traditional.
How much does it cost and how does it compare? Let's dive into that now. For 2022, the Tucson starts at $25,500, plus, of course, $1,225 of destination charge. All-wheel drive is standard on the hybrid and the plug-in hybrid, but it's optional on regular trims. That is important when you start taking a look at the price tag of the hybrid or the plug-in hybrid versus the regular model. The hybrid starts at $29,350. And when taking a look at the plug-in hybrid, remember that not only is all-wheel drive standard, but it also is eligible for a federal tax credit. And I suspect most shoppers of that vehicle will, of course, get that credit. But you should always check with a tax professional to make sure it applies to you. When you factor that into account, the hybrid is only a $2,350 jump over the base version with all-wheel drive. And the average American can expect to have that paid back in, again, about 3.9 years of driving. That's based on 15,000 miles a year and current gas prices. If gas prices go up, obviously it would take a little bit less time. And in reality, the average American is really going to have a break-even time shorter than that because this is much more likely to be closer to the EPA number in real-world driving, even if you're driving it hard, than the non-hybrid model. That's simply the way hybrids tend to work. One more thing before we move on, not all the prices are listed here because there are a ton of different ways that you can configure your model. When it comes to competition, obviously the first competitor has to be the RAV4. It's the best-selling compact crossover. It's the best-selling non-truck in America. Hundreds and hundreds of thousands of RAV4s go off the dealer lot every year, and I think it's easy to see why. The RAV4 is relatively well priced. It's well equipped, especially in the base model. It has a very fuel-efficient hybrid and a high-performance plug-in hybrid. And that high-performance plug-in hybrid honestly surprised a few people, including me. Not too many folks expected that to be the performance option in really the entire crossover segment here. 0 to 60 is very swift, over 300 horsepower in that model, and a long electric range. But the focus of this video is not necessarily on plug-in hybrids. That's going to be a separate video when I can get my hands on the Tucson plug-in hybrid. Let's instead talk about the base engine and the optional hybrid. The base RAV4 is going to be about $1,000 more expensive. It's a little bit over $26,500 MSRP before destination. And the hybrid model is also going to be a little bit more expensive at $29,075. Although the delta between the plug-in hybrid and the non-plug-in hybrid in the Toyota lineup is an awful lot smaller than it is on the Hyundai lineup. So that means if you're contemplating a RAV4, but you can convince yourself to get a hybrid model, the payback window is going to be a lot shorter. Also, the RAV4 hybrid gets better fuel economy, 40 mpg, and in real-world driving, 40 mpg is definitely achievable as long as you're not driving it around like a lunatic or frequently towing or going up large mountain passes. Average daily driving, you should be in the high 30s, perhaps even low 40s on a regular basis without too much effort. On the downside, the RAV4 doesn't handle quite as well. It is very close, but there is a little bit of a margin there for the Tucson. The big thing, however, is that the Tucson feels more premium on the inside and it feels bigger on the inside because it is bigger on the inside. With this generation RAV4, things actually shrank a little bit, and rear seat legroom is not as generous as I would like. It's a little bit difficult for me to fit a rear-facing child seat behind myself in a RAV4, but that's definitely something you can do in a Tucson. As far as performance goes, the hybrid system in the Tucson may give you a little bit more oomph, but it actually doesn't accelerate the vehicle any more quickly than the RAV4. It actually is just a hair slower, as I said before. That all has to do with the design of the system. But as far as performance goes, the two vehicles are very, very comparable. Hyundai has a longer warranty, but Toyota has an absolutely stellar reliability reputation. One that Hyundai is definitely encroaching upon, but I don't think they've eclipsed it quite yet. Next, let's talk about the Honda CR-V. This is one of the older alternatives in this segment, and I think it's really starting to show, especially with the infotainment system and the general design of the dashboard. Now, as far as parts quality goes, I like the CR-V, and I like the design, I have to say, even though it is feeling a little bit behind the times. It's also very roomy, very practical on the inside. It has a big cargo area, it has a very generous back seat, it's very child seat friendly as well. On the downside, Honda's pricing tends to be a little on the high side, and that is certainly something that we see with the CR-V for this year. If you're seriously considering the CR-V for your next vehicle, I would again caution you that real-world fuel economy numbers are not going to be where you might think they would be or hope they would be in that vehicle. It definitely is a step behind where we find the Hyundai Tucson. The Tucson can definitely achieve its EPA ratings and actually exceed them if you treat it gently. If you're going 70 miles an hour on the highway, you're not climbing over too many mountain passes, you can get absolutely excellent fuel economy. On one fuel economy test loop that I ran, I actually got 40 mpg by driving it a little bit more gently. The same thing, however, cannot be said of the CR-V, especially at those higher speeds. If you're frequently doing a lot of highway travel, it's not going to be as efficient as the Tucson or the RAV4. Next, let's skip over the Rogue and the Equinox because no hybrid or plug-in hybrid is offered over there. Instead, let's talk about the Ford Escape. The Escape was once one of the better selling options in this segment, but Ford has really decided to slice and dice their pie pretty thinly. So now they have the Bronco Sport, they have the Escape, they have the Edge, etc., and of course electric options, and that really has shrunk the share of the pie that the Escape is taking in this particular segment. But the Escape still has all the bases covered. There is a turbocharged option, actually two different turbocharged options. There's a hybrid option and a plug-in hybrid option, and you can get all-wheel drive with the hybrid. It's worth noting that this is one of the few hybrids out there in this immediate segment at any rate that comes standard in front-wheel drive. So if you want to save a little bit of money, save a little bit of complexity, and improve your fuel economy, you can get the Escape hybrid with 41 miles per gallon combined in front-wheel drive, 40 mpg combined with all-wheel drive. And like the Hyundai and the Honda, the Ford all-wheel drive system is a true mechanical all-wheel drive. On paper, the Ford would appear to be a little bit more expensive at $26,010 starting. The hybrid starts at $28,030, but the reality is you're going to get a better deal on the Escape on the dealer lot than you will likely get on the Hyundai or the Honda or the Toyota. There's just a little bit more cash on the hood and generally more aggressive financing deals available for the Escape as well. In addition, availability seems to be very good. So if you're looking at a hybrid or a plug-in hybrid model, it's probable that you will find more of those vehicles on the Ford dealer lot than the Hyundai or the Honda or the Toyota dealer lots next to them. As far as hybrid and all-wheel drive system performance go, the Escape is among the best because it combines the traction ability of the mechanical systems that we find in the Hyundai and the Honda with the smoothness of the drivetrain that we find in the RAV4. Again, the RAV4 and the Escape's hybrid systems are very similar in design. Now let's talk about an option in this segment that doesn't really have any hybrid systems or plug-in hybrid systems available, but is one of the best values in this segment, the Subaru Forester. Subaru has charted an interesting course with their base models lately by making all-wheel drive standard, but keeping the starting price of the Subaru below most of the competition. They easily win the value proposition here. You're not going to find quite as many features and gadgets on that base model, but you will find most of the same standard safety content that we find in the average crossover for a lower price. There are, of course, some compromises. The Forester can feel a little bit cheaper in some areas. You're not going to find quite as nice a trim inside. Materials and parts quality is not going to be where we find the base models of the competition. But again, it is going to be very inexpensive, and it's going to be pretty efficient. As far as all-wheel drive models go, high efficiency is definitely something that Subaru has been working on. If you're looking for an efficient small crossover that's not a hybrid, this should absolutely be on your shopping list. Also, if you're looking for an affordable, roomy crossover, the Forester should be on your list because it has a big cargo area thanks to the relatively square design, and it also has a ton of interior legroom. The Subaru and the Hyundai currently tie for most legroom in this segment. As I said before, Ford measures their legroom a little bit differently than some of the competition, so we have to put an asterisk right next to that number on the chart because you will definitely find the back seats of these other two options more accommodating. Well, let me know what you think about the Tucson down there in the comment section. Honestly, I think there are no bad options in this segment at the moment. The Subaru has an excellent value proposition. The Hyundai has a long standard warranty, the really great traction in the all-wheel drive system. For the hybrid model, the Toyota gets really excellent fuel economy and is likely going to be very reliable. And if you want basically that same sort of reliability and same sort of feel in a vehicle with a mechanical all-wheel drive system and an American logo on the front, you could get yourself a Ford Escape. Let me know what you think about that down there, and let me know what you think about the Tucson being one of the best rounded entries in this segment. It's hard to say that it is the best, but it is certainly one of the best rounded. I think that there is a logical, practical reason for you to buy any of the top 5 or 6 or 7 options in the compact crossover segment. Exactly which one is right for you will really depend on your priorities. But I think that the Tucson and its lineup really can appeal to a larger share of prospective buyers than the Subaru Forester, to be perfectly honest. Let me know what you think about that down there. Find me over at facebook.com/AlexNautas, Instagram, all those other social places, and of course, check out the merch store at awaymerch.com. I'll see all of you later.